Good morning everyone, Louis back with another video. In today's video we are gonna talk about shutter speed. Cue the intro. In the next series of videos I'm going to be showing you the three main components of the camera: the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. Into this video we're going to talk about the shutter speed. This is going to be a three-part series and I'm going to explain everything that I know about shutter speed in the simplest of terms so that you can understand it and then you can go ahead and practice. It's really not hard. So what is shutter speed? Your camera has three major settings that it adjusts every time that you press your shutter. Your shutter speed is one of them, the ISO, and the aperture of the lens. Your camera's meter will meter the light on the scene and it will try to compensate those three settings to obtain your proper exposure. Whether you have it in automatic, those three settings will be adjusted by the camera for you, so you don't have to do anything. If you have it in one of the semi-automatic modes, you can adjust one of them and then the camera will adjust the rest. Or if you can have it in full manual, you will do all the settings and manipulate all the settings to obtain what you want. But what is really shutter speed? What does shutter speed even mean? Basically, in a nutshell, shutter speed is the speed at which the mirror on your camera will flip up to open and expose the sensor to the image that you have in front of you. However long your shutter speed is the different effect that you're gonna have. So if you have a really fast shutter speed, you're gonna have motion frozen. It's used mainly for sports photography, if you want to photograph children running, or if you want to photograph race cars or anything that has to do with motion. If you want to freeze that motion, you want to use high shutter speed. If you want to use a long shutter speed on the other end of the spectrum, long shutter speeds are mainly used for when you take photos at night, when you want to get long exposures to get the nice blurry effect of the clouds, of the sea, and also to let more light in. It goes combined and it works alongside the other two settings on the camera. Basically, if you Google it on Wikipedia, you're gonna find something like this.
In photography, shutter speed or exposure time is the length of time when the film or digital sensor inside the camera is exposed to light. Also, when the camera's shutter is open when taking a photograph, and the amount of light that reaches the film or image sensor. That is proportional to the exposure time. 1/500 of a second will let half as much light as in 1/250th of a second.
But that's a bunch of numbers. Honestly, all you need to understand about it, it's at least the way that I understand it, it's a term thrown out there by photographers to describe one of the three components of the exposure triangle. Shutter speed, aside from being a setting on the camera, is also a creative tool. You can use shutter speed to achieve different effects in your photos and you can get creative with it. You can invoke an emotion by adding motion in your images. By adding motion, you add a sense of rush, a sense of movement. That fluidity in your images will attract a lot of viewers, and it's something that I try to have a lot of my images. Taking photos out of a moving train where everything's blurry, that's more of an artistic feel and more of experimentation. It's something that you can definitely do. Shutter speed is also dependent on the amount of frames per second that your camera can capture. Some cameras will have 7 frames a second, other cameras will have 5 frames a second. It's also correlated with the camera buffer and the speed of your SD card. Basically, if you have a fast card, you would, normally for high shutter speeds, or for fast shutter speeds rather, you would want to get fast cards to go along with your camera so that your camera's buffer don't fill up as much, because the speed of the SD card you have in your camera affects how many photos you take or how many exposures you can take before the buffer on the camera fills up. Normally mirrorless cameras tend to have higher frame rates because they don't have the flip up mirror. That slows down things a lot. An electronic shutter like the mirrorless cameras on the Fuji can do up to 11, even 30 frames a second if you have the right SD card. In this camera, for example, if you put it on, let's say 1000 of a second, and you press the shutter on high burst mode, it's gonna keep shooting and shooting and shooting until your buffer starts to fill, and that's what happens. Many other cameras have bigger buffers. Again, mirrorless cameras have higher burst rates. If you have a DSLR, once you press the shutter, I have it set for 2 seconds just for demonstration purposes. Once you press the shutter, the mirror is gonna flip up and you're gonna see that in there is the shutter. The shutter of the camera will expose the sensor to the image in front of you for the duration of time that you have it set up for. Basically that is a shutter, so once you press the shutter, it will open up the shutter, expose the lens, and then bring the mirror down. That is basically how the camera exposes the sensor to the light. Shutter speed is used in many ways. One of the main ways that I personally use it for whenever I shoot wildlife is I put it on, and I have a Canon, so in this case it would be time value, which is TV. If you were to have a Nikon, it would be something else, or a mirrorless camera like a Fuji would be something else. But in the Canon is TV, which stands for time value. And in time value, what's great about it is that it's like a semi-automatic mode where the camera will adjust most of the settings for you, and then you would just adjust your shutter speed. In this case, time value will adjust your aperture for you to expose your scene properly based on the shutter speed that you have. It will also adjust the ISO if you have it on automatic ISO. So my homework for you guys this time is to don't worry about any of the settings in your camera. Put your camera in any form of shutter priority, either if you have a Canon, time value. If you have another camera manufacturer, you can Google or you can look in your manual how to put it on shutter priority. And then I encourage you to try and experiment with shutter speeds and see how they affect your images. Okay, this is it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, please subscribe if you're into already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.